On the night of March 27, 2022, the world watched in disbelief as one of Hollywood's most beloved stars stepped onto the Oscar stage and delivered a moment that would shatter his carefully built image. Will Smith, once celebrated as the Prince of Hollywood, stunned millions when he slapped comedian Chris Rock live on television. The incident instantly became one of the most shocking scandals in Academy Award history, igniting debates across every corner of the globe. But this was not just a man losing his temper. It was the climax of decades of fame, pressure, and a fragile personal life exposed under the brightest spotlight. For years, Will Smith represented charm, charisma, and resilience, a superstar who seemed untouchable. And yet, with a single strike, his name became synonymous with controversy. How did a boy from Philadelphia rise to dominate music, television, and film, only to risk everything in a single night? And what secrets hide beneath the surface of his picture-perfect life? This is the untold story of Will Smith, his rise, his fall, and the question that lingers: can he ever truly recover? Willard Carroll Smith Jr. was born on September 25, 1968, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His father, Willard Smith Sr., was a strict refrigeration engineer who valued discipline and order, while his mother, Caroline Bright, worked as a school administrator. Together, they created a household that balanced structure with education, instilling both resilience and ambition in their children. Will grew up in the middle-class neighborhood of Winfield, alongside three siblings. Outwardly, his childhood seemed stable, but behind closed doors, the Smith family carried a darker reality. Will later revealed the trauma of witnessing his father's volatile temper. At just 9 years old, he saw his father strike his mother so violently that the image burned into his memory. That moment planted both fear and determination deep inside him, fear of repeating the violence, and determination to rise above it. Despite the turbulence at home, Will was known in his community as endlessly charismatic. Teachers described him as a born entertainer, always ready with a joke or impersonation. Friends nicknamed him Prince for his natural charm and ability to talk his way out of trouble. Yet beneath the laughter, Will carried the weight of unresolved pain, often using humor as a shield. Religion and culture also shaped his identity. Raised in a Baptist household, he was taught discipline and moral duty, but his neighborhood exposed him to both opportunity and danger. Philadelphia in the 1970s was vibrant yet tough, and Will learned quickly how to adapt, using his wit as his greatest weapon. These early experiences, the fractured family life, the strict discipline, the wounds of childhood violence, would later influence the roles he chose, the lyrics he wrote, and the need for validation that defined much of his career. Will Smith's story was never just about success. It began with a boy determined to turn pain into performance. Will Smith attended Overbrook High School in Philadelphia, where his sharp wit and magnetic personality made him stand out. He excelled academically but was far more interested in entertaining than in following a traditional path. Teachers encouraged his talents, but Will had already discovered his true passion, rap music. Inspired by the emerging hip-hop movement of the 1980s, he began writing rhymes that combined humor, storytelling, and clean lyrics, setting him apart from the harder-edged rap that dominated the streets. At 16, Will partnered with his childhood friend Jeffrey Towns, better known as DJ Jazzy Jeff. Together, they formed the duo DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Their playful style, filled with clever wordplay and relatable themes, resonated with a young audience. By 1987, they had released their debut album Rock the House, which introduced Will to the national stage. Unlike many rappers of the era, Will avoided profanity, branding himself as family-friendly and commercially appealing. But success came with a price. Will was so caught up in the excitement of music that he turned down a scholarship opportunity from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. While his academic potential was undeniable, he believed the stage was his destiny. "You can study engineers all you want," he once said, "but when God gives you a gift, you can't ignore it." The gamble paid off. In 1988, the duo's second album produced the hit single Parents Just Don't Understand. which earned them the first ever Grammy Award in the rap category. Suddenly, the boy from Philadelphia was no longer just a local talent. He was a rising star in a genre that was rapidly reshaping American culture. Yet, even at this early stage, Will faced challenges. Success brought money, and with it, reckless spending. By the early 1990s, he would find himself dangerously close to financial ruin. Still, these struggles only fueled his hunger for the next big break, pushing him toward an opportunity that would forever redefine his career. By the early 1990s, Will Smith had already achieved recognition in the music industry, but financial mismanagement nearly ended his career before it truly began. Lavish spending and unpaid taxes left him owing the Internal Revenue Service over $2.8 million, forcing him to surrender much of his income. At just 21, the rising star was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. What seemed like the collapse of his dream, however, became the turning point of his life. In 1990, NBC offered Will the chance to star in a sitcom loosely inspired by his own persona. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was born, placing him at the center of a show that would become a cultural phenomenon. Audiences adored the series for its humor, heart, and sharp exploration of race and class in America. For 6 seasons, Will's character brought laughter into living rooms worldwide, and his effortless charm transformed him from a rapper in debt into a household name. But television was only the beginning. Will soon set his sights on Hollywood's biggest stage, film. In 1995, he co-starred in Bad Boys alongside Martin Lawrence. The buddy cop action film exploded at the box office, proving that Will had the charisma to command the big screen. A year later, he solidified his position with Independence Day, 1996, one of the highest-grossing films of the decade. His heroic portrayal of a fighter pilot saving the world from aliens elevated him to blockbuster royalty. Then came Men in Black, 1997, a science fiction comedy that paired him with Tommy Lee Jones. The film's global success, combined with Will's chart-topping theme song, cemented his reputation as the ultimate cross-media entertainer. Within just a few years, he had transitioned from a near-bankrupt rapper to one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. What set Will apart was not only his versatility but also his relentless work ethic. He trained obsessively for roles, studied box office trends, and even analyzed international markets to understand what made films succeed globally. He famously declared, "I want to be the biggest movie star in the world." And for a time, he achieved exactly that. By the early 2000s, Will Smith had delivered hit after hit. Enemy of the State, 1998. Ali, 2001, which earned him his first Academy Award nomination, and I, Robot, 2004. His performances combined charm, emotional depth, and a magnetic presence that appealed to audiences of all ages. Few actors in history had dominated both the music charts and the box office with such consistency. This golden period marked the height of Will Smith's career, a time when he appeared untouchable. He was no longer the boy from Philadelphia struggling with family scars or financial chaos. He had become a global icon, embodying success, resilience, and the American dream itself. But as with every meteoric rise, shadows loomed on the horizon, personal struggles and public scrutiny that would eventually threaten to unravel everything he had built. Behind the dazzling lights of Hollywood, Will Smith's personal life unfolded in ways just as dramatic as his career. His first marriage was to Sherry Zampino in 1992, and together they had a son, Trey. While Will was already rising as a star, the demands of fame quickly strained their young marriage. By 1995, the couple divorced, leaving Will deeply shaken. He later admitted that divorce was one of the greatest failures of his life, an experience that would haunt him for years. But destiny had other plans. Not long after, Will crossed paths with actress Jada Pinkett. Their chemistry was undeniable. By 1997, they were married, and soon after, they welcomed 2 children, Jaden, born 1998, and Willow, born 2000. Together, the Smiths projected the image of a modern Hollywood power couple, talented, ambitious, and fearless in raising children who would also step into the spotlight. Yet, beneath the surface, their marriage became a constant subject of fascination and speculation. Will and Jada often spoke about their unconventional approach to love. They rejected the idea of a traditional union, emphasizing trust, freedom, and personal growth over rigid rules. This openness, however, sparked rumors. Tabloids speculated about affairs, separations, and secret struggles. The speculation reached a peak in 2020 when Jada admitted during her online show Red Table Talk that she had been involved in what she described as an entanglement with singer August Alsina while she and Will were separated. The revelation went viral, creating endless memes and public debates. Millions watched as Will sat silently during the broadcast, his pained expression revealing more than words ever could. It was a moment that stripped away the glossy facade of their marriage, exposing vulnerabilities that fans had never seen before. Still, despite the humiliation and gossip, the couple refused to collapse under public scrutiny. Will emphasized that their bond was deeper than conventional labels, stating that nothing could break their partnership. "We ride together, we die together, bad marriage for life," they declared, borrowing a line from Bad Boys. For some, this resilience was admirable. For others, it suggested a relationship entangled in more complexity than most could comprehend. Their marriage has since become one of Hollywood's most analyzed unions, equal parts inspiration and cautionary tale. Together, they raised children who became stars in their own right, but their transparency also blurred the line between private life and public performance. For Will, love and marriage were never just about romance. They became a theater of triumphs and trials, a mirror reflecting his deepest insecurities and greatest commitments. For decades, Will Smith embodied the idea of a flawless star, handsome, charming, bankable, and scandal-free compared to many of his Hollywood peers. But in 2022, that carefully polished image cracked before the entire world. The Academy Awards, an event designed to celebrate cinematic excellence, became the stage for the most infamous moment of his career. On March 27, 2022, the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles was filled with the industry's brightest names. Will, nominated for his role in King Richard, was on the verge of achieving the crowning moment of his career. But when comedian Chris Rock took the stage to present an award, he made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, comparing her to G.I. Jane. To many, it seemed like a harmless quip. To Will, whose wife had been open about struggling with alopecia, it was a deeply personal insult. In a moment that stunned the world, Will Smith walked onto the stage and delivered a sharp slap across Chris Rock's face. The sound echoed not just in the theater but across social media platforms. Broadcast lived to millions of viewers. As he returned to his seat, Will shouted, "Keep my wife's name out your ****ing mouth." The theater fell silent. Viewers at home scrambled to process what had just happened. Within minutes, the slap became the most talked about incident in Oscar history. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Social media exploded with memes, debates, and condemnation. Some defended Will as a husband protecting his wife's dignity, while others saw his action as a shocking act of violence in a setting meant to honor artistry and civility. Hollywood elites, journalists, and fans around the globe weighed in, splitting public opinion in ways that few celebrity scandals ever had. What made the incident even more surreal was what followed. Less than an hour later, Will Smith won the Academy Award for Best Actor for King Richard. His acceptance speech was tearful and erratic, in which he apologized to the Academy but not to Chris Rock. He spoke about being called to protect his family and likened himself to Richard Williams, the fiercely protective father of Venus and Serena Williams. For some, the speech sounded like justification. For others, it was a raw display of a man unraveling under decades of pressure. In the days that followed, the Academy launched a formal investigation. Prominent figures like Jim Carrey, Zoe Kravitz, and others condemned his actions, while Denzel Washington and Tyler Perry were seen consoling him that night, whispering advice about handling the storm ahead. Within weeks, The Academy banned Will Smith from attending the Oscars and related events for 10 years. It was an unprecedented punishment, signaling how seriously the organization viewed the incident. The professional damage was swift. Several of his film projects were delayed or quietly shelved. Studios grew hesitant, fearing backlash. His image as a family-friendly star, once one of his strongest assets, was now tainted. Even his long-running collaborations faced uncertainty. With sequels like Bad Boys 4 momentarily put on hold, the personal toll was just as heavy. Will issued multiple apologies, first through social media, then later in a video where he addressed Chris Rock directly, expressing remorse and admitting he had lost control. Yet, Chris Rock himself largely refused to engage, choosing instead to process the incident through stand-up comedy, where he joked about being slapped by Suge Smith, a reference to infamous music mogul Suge Knight. The scandal represented more than a single act of violence. It symbolized the collapse of the myths surrounding Will Smith. For decades, he had been seen as a figure of positivity, discipline, and relentless self-improvement, but the slap showed the world his flaws, his vulnerability, and perhaps years of bottled-up frustration spilling out at the worst possible moment. For Hollywood, it was a lesson in how quickly legacies could change. For Will Smith, it was the darkest chapter of his career, a night meant to immortalize his achievements that instead scarred his reputation forever. In the wake of the Oscars scandal, Will Smith found himself standing at a crossroads that few Hollywood icons had ever faced. For the first time in his career, the man who had once been untouchable was now radioactive. The Academy's 10-year ban made headlines, but the punishment from the industry itself proved far harsher. Several major studios either delayed or canceled projects that had been in development for years. Suddenly, the actor who had built his reputation on being one of the most reliable box office draws was viewed as a liability. The immediate months following the slap were a period of silence and reflection. Will disappeared from public view, issuing only carefully worded apologies. In July 2022, he released a 5-minute video in which he addressed Chris Rock directly, admitting, "I was wrong, and I'm trying not to think of myself as a piece of shit." The confession, raw and unpolished, revealed a man wrestling not only with the consequences of his actions but also with the erosion of his identity as a role model. Professionally, his next big test came with Emancipation, 2022, a historical drama directed by Antoine Fuqua. The film was originally expected to be an Oscar contender, but the shadow of the scandal loomed large. Critics praised Will's performance, but audiences and awards voters largely turned away, unable, or unwilling, to separate the art from the artist. What should have been a triumphant showcase of his talent became instead a sobering reminder of how far he had fallen. Yet Will Smith has never been a man to surrender easily. He embarked on what many called a redemption tour, re-emerging on social media with motivational messages, humor, and candid reflections on failure. He leaned on his family, especially Jada and their children, who stood by him despite the public scrutiny. In interviews, he admitted that the journey ahead would be long, but insisted he was committed to rebuilding trust with both audiences and colleagues. Slowly, signs of recovery began to appear. In 2023, reports confirmed that Bad Boys 4 was back in production, signaling that Hollywood was willing to cautiously bet on his star power again. Fans, too, seemed divided but intrigued, while some vowed never to support him again. Others expressed hope that he could redeem himself, citing his decades of contributions to film and music. Will's comeback remains fragile, but his resilience is undeniable. He has framed his scandal as a painful but transformative chapter, one that forced him to confront the flaws beneath his carefully constructed image. Whether or not the public fully forgives him, Will Smith continues to fight for a second act. His legacy now rests not just on his past triumphs, but on whether he can rise again from the most devastating fall of his career. Today, Will Smith lives in the uneasy space between redemption and rejection. He remains a global household name, but the shadow of the Oscars incident still lingers. Professionally, the tide has begun to turn. with the revival of Bad Boys 4 and whispers of other projects quietly moving forward. Studios appear willing to gamble once more on his undeniable star power. Yet every appearance he makes, every interview he gives, is measured against that one night in March 2022. Privately, Will has leaned heavily on self-reflection. He speaks openly about therapy, spiritual growth, and his determination to redefine himself beyond the polished persona he once projected. His social media presence has evolved into a mix of humor, vulnerability, and motivational messages, an attempt to reconnect with fans by showing them the man behind the myth. Still, controversy clings to his family. Jada Pinkett Smith's candid revelations about their marriage continue to fuel headlines. And the so-called entanglement remains a cultural buzzword. For Will, the boundary between public and private life seems permanently blurred, a reminder that fame is as much a curse as it is a crown. At 55, Will Smith is no longer just the Fresh Prince or the king of summer blockbusters. He is a man whose journey reflects both triumph and turmoil, brilliance and brokenness. His story is not finished, it is suspended in a fragile balance between legacy and scandal. The question now is not whether Will Smith has talent. His decades of work prove that beyond doubt. The question is whether audiences are ready to embrace him again, to allow his future to be defined not only by his fall but also by his potential rise. Is this the twilight of his career, or merely the beginning of a new chapter in the saga of one of Hollywood's most complex stars?